Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Maple Grove Scripture Reading Podcast. So last time we were covering the two modes of divine speech that Elihu lays out in verses 13 through 22. God speaks through dreams in the night when defenses are down and terrifies people with warnings aimed at turning them from the edge of the pit. And he speaks through physical suffering when the body fails and the flesh wastes and everything that kept a person insulated from the truth gets stripped away. Both modes lead to the same edge. Both point the same direction. Today we're going to find out what happens at that edge. So let me read chapter 33, verses 23 through 28. Yet if there is an angel at their side, a messenger, 1 out of 1,000, sent to tell them how to be upright, and he is gracious to that person, and says to God, spare them from going down to the pit, I have found a ransom for them. Let their flesh be renewed like a child's. Let them be restored as in the days of their youth. Then that person can pray to God and find favor with him. They will see God's face and shout for joy. He will restore them to full well-being. And they will go to others and say, I have sinned. I have perverted what is right, but I did not get what I deserved. God has delivered me from going down to the pit, and I shall live to enjoy the light of life. So we've got the word yet at the beginning of verse 23. The previous section ended with someone drawn near to the pit, their life close to the messengers of death. That's as dark as the picture gets. And then, yet. So we've got the turn, a way out of a situation that looked finished. The turn comes through a figure Elihu introduces without a whole lot of fanfare. An angel at their side, a messenger, 1 out of 1,000. This is a mediating figure, someone positioned between the dying person and God who speaks on their behalf. The word translated angel is the ordinary Hebrew word for messenger. It's malach. It can refer to a heavenly being or a human one. Elihu doesn't specify which. What he specifies is the role. This messenger is sent to tell the person how to be upright and then acts as their intercessor. Elihu doesn't explain where this figure comes from or how the process works. He just says, this is how it can happen. If such a figure appears, if he is gracious, then what follows becomes possible. 1 out of 1,000. That phrase suggests rarity. This isn't a common occurrence, an ordinary feature of every life. It's exceptional, something that doesn't happen by default. Whether Elihu has a specific kind of figure in mind or whether he's describing a general category of mediating presence is a question commentators have engaged at length. Job has asked for something like this earlier in the book, if you remember. Back in chapter 9, he said he wished there was someone to arbitrate between him and God, to lay a hand on both of them. In chapter 16, he said he had an advocate on high, someone to vouch for him before God. Elihu's figure does something similar, but in the opposite direction. Not an advocate for Job's innocence, but a bearer of a ransom. What's clear is the function. This figure speaks to God on behalf of the person near the pit and speaks on the basis of something the person couldn't provide themselves. He says to God, spare them from going down to the pit. I have found a ransom for them. So that word, again, the word for ransom, it's kofer, atonement, a payment made to cover a life. It appears in Exodus chapter 30 in the context of the atonement money paid at the census, a half shekel given so that no plague would come. It appears in Numbers 35 in the context of ransom for a life taken by violence. It's carrying the weight of a transaction, something given in exchange for something else, specifically a life at risk. So the language is not really metaphorical here, it's more precise. A price has been found, something adequate to cover the debt. The mediating figure doesn't argue for the person. He doesn't present evidence on their innocence or make a case for their righteousness. He says, I have found a ransom, and that's all. And it's enough. This is a very theologically loaded sentence in Elihu's speech. Commentators across the centuries, including those in our movement, the Restoration movement, have noted that the ransom language points forward. A mediator who appears at the edge of the pit, who finds a ransom, who speaks to God on behalf of someone who could not save themselves. That picture doesn't just stay contained with Elihu's immediate argument. Whether Elihu understood the full scope of what he's describing, the language itself carries more than he probably intended. The New Testament is going to pick up this thread and pull it to its conclusion. 1 Timothy 2:5 says, "There is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Jesus Christ, who gave himself as a ransom for all." So you've got very similar words. You've really got the same transaction, and you've got one mediator and a ransom found. The person who could not save themselves is saved. Elihu's vision is partial, as all pre-resurrection vision of this was partial. But the shape of what he describes is the shape of the gospel. For now, in Elihu's argument, the effect is what matters. When the ransom is found and grace is extended, the reverse is total. Let their flesh be renewed like a child's, he says. Let them be restored as in the days of their youth. Flesh that had wasted away comes back. Bones that had been visible under the skin fill out again. The body that's suffering stripped down is given back. And more than the body, the relationship with God is restored. That person can pray to God and find favor. They will see God's face and shout for joy. So that phrase may land a little differently in the context of the book. Job had wanted to see God's face. In chapter 13, he said he would argue his case to God's face. In chapter 19, he said, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God." Job's deepest longing was not vindication in an abstract sense. It was to see God, to have the relationship restored, to know that the one he'd been arguing with was still there and still for him. Elihu is describing exactly that as the outcome of the mediator's work. See God's face, shout for joy, restore to full well-being. That word restored, it's the same word, it's the same root that is used throughout the Old Testament for returning something to its original state, to full well-being. The way things were before all of this happened. This is what the edge of the pit leads to when the ransom is found. And then the person goes out and says something. I have sinned, I have perverted what is right, but I did not get what I deserved. So there are three things in that confession. First, an acknowledgement of sin, genuine and unqualified. Second, a recognition of grace. I did not get what I deserved. And third, the reason for both. God has delivered me from going down to the pit, and I shall live to enjoy the light of life. The confession is public. It goes to others. The person who is near the pit and turned around doesn't keep the experience private. They go and tell what happened. And the testimony they give is not a claim of innocence. It's an honest acknowledgement of failure, paired with an honest account of grace. They sinned, they deserved worse, and God stepped in. That sequence matters. Sin acknowledged, grace received, testimony given. The person doesn't emerge from the pit saying they were right all along. They emerge saying they were wrong and that God was merciful anyway. It's a very different kind of vindication than the one Job has been asking for. Job wants his name cleared, his case proven, his suffering explained. The restoration person in Elihu's picture walks out of the pit with their name not cleared, but covered. And that turns out to be enough to shout about. It's a very different posture than what Job has been holding. Job has not claimed innocence out of pride, really. His claim has always been that the punishment doesn't fit, that he's being charged with what he didn't do. Elihu's picture of the restored person is someone who's moved through something and come out the other side with a different account. Not that I was innocent and I was wronged, but I was wrong and I was spared. Now, whether that applies to Job's specific situation, Elihu hasn't really said yet. He hasn't told Job that he needs to confess. He hasn't told Job that a mediator has appeared. He's described a pattern, and he's let Job sit with it, and the question hangs in the air as the chapter comes to a close. Now, next time we are going to look at the last 5 verses of chapter 33, where Elihu is going to wrap up his argument here, repeats the pattern of God's patient intervention, and makes one final appeal to Job to speak or be silent and learn. Hope you have a great day. I'll talk again soon. God bless.